morning, everybody. It's Rosemary. Welcome to my sewing room. Today I thought maybe we would do something really fast and simple. I was looking through some of my older videos, and I did do a video that included needles, but I've never really talked to you a little bit about thread. So I thought today we would go over thread. As most of you who watch my channel know, I work in a sewing machine store, and I see people on a daily basis that struggle with problems with their sewing machine, and they don't even know what's causing it. And a lot of the times it really is the thread. I heard somebody recently say thread is fine if you take it and you pull on it and it doesn't break, go ahead and use it. And there's a lot of truth to that, because we do want to use up some of our thread, but if it does have a shelf life, it does get old and brittle and it breaks easy. Definitely, if you pull on it and it breaks, throw it away, don't use it. But there's going to be times when you maybe want to just use it for hand sewing and not use it on your sewing machine. If you've got a really nice sewing machine, the last thing you want is for the thread to break inside your tensions, wrap around your tension spring, and then you got to bring it into service, because there's no way to get in there and get that thread out. Also, it will affect your stitches. If you're very particular about the way your stitches look in your quilt, it is going to be different if you're using a really inexpensive cotton covered polyester thread versus 100% polyester long staple thread. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk to you about is thread weight. And yes, thread does have weight, and it's basically on a number system. The smaller the number, the thicker the thread. So this is a 12 weight thread, and this is a really thick thread. And then this is a 40 weight thread, and it's a really thin thread. This is embroidery thread, and embroidery thread is usually shiny, and it's used in your embroidery machine. And there's a lot of people out there buying embroidery machines now who don't really understand the difference. And this is the thread that you want to use in your embroidery machine, because as it lays down the stitches, they lay flatter and they look nicer. They almost blend together because of the thinness of the thread. And they even make a thinner one that's usually 60 weight, so that you can do really teeny tiny embroideries without it bunching up or causing a whole lot of little knots and everything. Now this is regular sewing thread, and sewing thread is usually about 40 weight as well, but it is bulkier, and if you put that in your embroidery machine, it's not going to lay as nice, it's not going to be as pretty. There's a lot of people who go ahead and do it, but it just, that's not what it's made for, and it doesn't usually look good. But a regular 40 weight thread is what people sew with for most items. And then this is 100% cotton. It's also going to be a 40 weight. But they also make quilting thread that's like 50, 60, 70, 80 weight. And if you have an 80 weight thread, it's very, very, very fine, very thin. It's not strong enough to use to make a garment or even do your piecing with, but it's great for sewing the top of your quilt, because it's not going to add a lot of bulk. It's not going to make the quilt stiff, especially if you do little tiny pebbles or close together stitching or anything like that. It's not going to add a lot of bulk, and it'll make your quilt come out really nice. So that's another reason to use a different weight of thread. Now this one, okay, I was talking about this one a minute ago. This is a 12 weight thread. This is very thick, but it's also not very strong. It's made by Sulky. I bought it a long time ago because I wanted something that had like kind of a rustic look to it. I was making a quilt that was made out of homespun fabrics. I wanted it to look country, and the stitch in the ditch to look like it was hand done by my grandmother, but it was done by me on my sewing machine. So it was perfect for that. It's not very strong. I can break it with my bare hands, but it's very thick, and it looks like it would be strong. It also, what was I going to say? I was going to say something else about it. I can't even remember. Oh, so you have to adjust your tensions a little bit when you use this thread. You have to make them a little bit tighter, believe it or not, because if you don't make it, the tension in your bobbin case makes the thread tight, because the bobbin case is set for a thinner thread. So in order to accommodate that, you make the top tension tighter, and then they work together and you get good stitches. It's the first time I heard that, I thought the person was crazy. You would have to loosen the tension, but that doesn't work. You want to make it the tension tighter, and it really does work. But I'll be honest with you, I almost never use thick thread in my sewing machine because I don't want to mess with my tensions. I usually find a stitch in my machine that looks like hand stitching, and then I use regular thread. So another thick thread is this thread right here. This is Gutermann, and it's 12 weight, but it is really, really, really strong. You can see I can't break it. It's really strong. And I like this thread for hand sewing. I make a lot of dolls, and when I make a doll, I want to be able to put the long needle through the arms and pull on it really hard to make them stick together and not come apart. I also might use it for sewing the outside of a doll or something that I want to pull really hard and pull down and get a different technique or a different ending feature of what I'm making. And I got to have strong thread, because I'll tell you something, there's nothing more frustrating than pulling really hard on your needle and having the thread break. So that's what this is for. I do not put this in my sewing machine. It's too thick and I don't really care for it that way. So anyway, that's basically the different weights of thread. Now let's move on to different kinds of thread. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is the different kinds of thread that there are out there. There's embroidery thread, there's quilting thread, there's regular sewing thread, and there's all kinds of brands out there. So it's a little bit confusing. It can be a little bit daunting, especially if you're a new sewer and you don't know a whole lot about different kinds of threads that are out there. So I know there are going to be people who are going to argue with me about cotton thread. People use 100% cotton thread in their quilting because real purists, they use 100% cotton fabric, and they want to use 100% cotton thread when they're doing their quilting, when they're piecing, and when they're doing the top stitching on their quilt. So that, and I asked a quilter about this once, so you're welcome to make a comment if you disagree with me, but she told me that the reason why you use 100% cotton thread is because you want it to last for a long, long time, and over a period of time the polyester starts to almost saw into your cotton fabric and it'll start to come apart. Well, this is the way I look at it. If you sew with 100% cotton thread, your quilt may last 100 years, and that would be wonderful if you took really good care of it. I remember telling her, I'm like, yeah, but if you put it in the washing machine, it'll fall apart because the cotton isn't as strong. And she went, oh my gosh, why would you put your quilt in the washing machine? There are different rules about how to wash a quilt. Well, when I make a quilt, I make a baby quilt or I make a quilt for my family, I know it's going in the washing machine. I know they're going to use it. I know it's going to go on the bed and get wrapped up in babies and get used up all the time. And so I would rather that quilt last 20 years and get used up than last 100 years and get really taken very good care of and sit in somebody's cedar chest or something like that. I have baby quilts that I made for my grandchildren that are in their 20s, in their late 20s actually. Some of them are, I have a grandson that's 27 years old, and he's got babies of his own, and they're still using those quilts. So it's a choice you have to make. I actually like to use polyester to piece my quilts and then to sew the top parts of them. And most of my quilts are 100% cotton. I do use other kinds of fabrics in them as well. So that is cotton versus polyester threads. This is a 100% cotton thread as well. And then this is a metallic thread. Metallic threads are fun to use for decorative stitching. If you're an embroiderer, you can put it in your embroidery machine and you can do all sorts of crazy stuff like make the crowns, or if you're doing a warrior, or if you're doing Buzz Lightyear, you could put some gold in certain parts where his lights are or something like that. They are fun. I don't like to do a whole lot of sewing with metallic threads because they twist and they give you trouble. As they come off the spool, they twist and the metal starts to twist, and then it starts to split, and then it knots around your needle, and it gives you all sorts of heartache. Now there's some tricks. One, use a top stitch needle. A top stitch needle will has a bigger eye so the thread doesn't rub on the eye as it's coming through, and it'll keep it from splitting. Also, stand your thread up, stand it up, and the thread comes off the top like this, and it'll twist less, and you'll have less problems. One thing some people have told me is put them on backwards, because that way it comes off the same way it went on, and it doesn't twist as much. And there's a whole bunch of other tricks. Some people say take the thread and put it all the way across like 3 feet away from your sewing machine, and as it feeds, it untwists and it comes off. So you can see that it's obviously not something that's easy to use, but it's fun to use. So you make the decision what you would like to do as far as metallic threads go. Then there's, this is 100% polyester embroidery thread. And if you have an embroidery machine, you're going to use embroidery thread. Don't use regular sewing thread in your embroidery machine. And they have a smaller end on them, and they're usually shiny. They also make a rayon one, which I don't have a whole lot of rayon ones. The difference between polyester and rayon in your embroidery machine, the biggest difference you're going to find is the rayon will fade. I don't have a lot of troubles with it when I embroider with it, but then again, I don't wash in hot water, I wash in cold water. But I remember years ago when my grandchildren were little, I made a baby blanket for my daughter, and she called me and said, "Mom, I washed that and all the color washed out of it. It's all, the embroidery design is white now." And it's because she put bleach in there, and she put who knows what else in her washing machine, because that's the kind of person she is. She likes the smell, and she likes everything to be really clean, and so she washes in hot water with bleach and all the other kinds of detergents and stuff in it. It faded out. So you're going to take that into consideration if you use the rayons over the polyesters. But other than that, they're both really pretty embroidery threads, and they're fun to use for different kinds of things. So I think that kind of covers the different kinds of threads that are out there. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the issues that I see happen every single day in the store. And one of the major ones, I'm going to move this over, is, I don't know, maybe I should bring this down a little bit, is the way the thread feeds off of your sewing machine. And I really recommend a stand like this one. This is a Brother one. It has 10 spools. That may be overkill. They also have them that have only 1 spool. But the thing about it is that the thread feeds up off the top, and you don't have issues with it catching on the end. Like for instance, this is embroidery thread. Embroidery thread has a little end on this side and a big end on this side. Most of the time, there are ones out there that look like your standard everyday spool of thread. What happens if you take that spool cap that comes with your sewing machine and you put it on the end here, the thread moves down and catches right here, and it pulls. And then it pulls on your needle, bends your needle, breaks your needle sometimes, but it also can make your embroidery have little tiny loops. Every time it catches, it makes a loop. And then you say, why is this really pretty? And then now there's a loop there. And I don't understand what's causing it. The sewing machine must be broken. And it's just simply that stupid spool that's in the way. And I had somebody from Brother once tell me, just don't use any spool at all, any spool cap at all, and you'll be happy, because it kind of rests very evenly. But a lot of the machines nowadays come with the small little tiny spool like this, and it will fit right into the end of your spool of thread. And that is fabulous, because there's nothing to catch your thread as it comes off the spool. So I really like these. You usually have 3. So there's one here, there's one here. If I'm using a spool like this, I want that spool cap to fit right on the end. I don't want it to be bigger, and I don't want it to be smaller. I want it to fit on the end. This spool of thread, which is an Aurifil, which is a good brand of thread, 100% cotton, long staple with no little knots in it. This is a big pain in the neck, because it's going to catch. If I put a spool cap on it, I'm going to have thread catching right on the end of it. So I like this one that I can put in there, hold it on my sewing machine, and it won't give me any trouble. Or put it on a thread stand so that it pulls straight up like this. So either way, but definitely don't put a big old spool cap on it. And while we're talking about thread catching, look at this one. This is a good spool of thread, but it's catching right here on the ends as it comes off the spools. See the way it catches? When it's over here, it's fine. but as it works its way over to here, that's when it catches. And that will make it pull on your needle and make it not sew right, or not pull through your thread path right. And then you're frustrated, you're like, what the heck is wrong with my sewing machine? Is there something catching my thread? And it's your spool. So watch that. If you feel like something's pulling, or your needle's pulling, or you're having some issues, watch that. I wish I had a solution to that. When it gets down there where it's really low, sometimes I'll just wind the thread onto a bobbin, and then it won't, it'll come off the bobbin better, but I try and put it on a thread stand, because then it pulls off a lot easier than it does when it's lying sideways. And I really don't like the thread to stand up straight and spin. People want to do that. They want to put it, let me see if I can put this, hopefully. If I've got the thread standing up straight and feeding into the machine straight like this, it seems like it'll pull off evenly, but what ends up happening is there's a lot of weight on that spool of thread, and it doesn't pull off evenly, and it gives you trouble, even if you put a felt pad down there. But you can do that too. You can stand it up straight and see if it'll feed off that way without giving you any trouble. This is a really old spool of thread. I don't even know where I got it from. And it's one of those that you buy at a big box store. And it looks, people are really familiar with this shape, so they buy it because that's what mom sewed with. So the problem with this, number one, is it's old thread. Number two, a lot of them, and you've seen them, that had styrofoam on the ends. They thought that was a great idea. What happened with that is the styrofoam got all bent up and it caught on there. The other one, they have like little notches that go around the outside of it, and the thread catches on that. This one's got that little notch that goes right here that the thread will catch into, that was supposed to hold your thread from coming off the spool. But what does it do? As the thread comes off the spool while you're sewing, it catches continually on that. And then not only does it make little cuts in your thread, but it makes it pull on your needle, and it makes the stitches come out bad. So be really careful with this. I would never put this on my sewing machine. Even if I had a thread cap over it, it probably is going to give me issues. And so I use it for hand sewing, or I throw it away. That's just one of those things that you're going to do. So anyway, so that was a quick video. I don't know what thread you're sewing with. I hope that you are trying to just have a really great time. Another thing is, if you go into the secondhand store and you see somebody's cleaned out grandma's attic and put a bunch of thread in there, you thought, oh wow, that's a great deal. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Try and stick with newer thread on a little bit better spool, and your sewing will be so much easier, and you'll be so much happier. I remember once a lady came into the store, and she had just had her machine repaired, and she said, this machine's not fixed, it still doesn't work. And I said, would you mind if I rethreaded it with a different thread? And she said, I don't care, just whatever you can do to make my machine work. I rethreaded it with a little bit better brand of thread with a better spool, and it sewed beautifully. So it really does make a difference in the way your stitches come out and the way your project comes out. So I hope you learned something today. I would appreciate if you would like and subscribe. We will keep coming back to you with more videos, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.